Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Phil Carson from the RSPB and I'd like to welcome you to the first of two webinars focused on how future agricultural policy can deliver nature-friendly farming and sustainable land management in Northern Ireland. We've developed these in partnership with the Northern Ireland Nature-Friendly Farming Network, so big thanks to them for all of their assistance. We're delighted to have such interest with a capacity of 100 people logging in today, including food and farming organisations, individual farmers, environmental NGOs and policymakers. These sessions were originally planned to take place face-to-face on the 18th of March, but unfortunately due to the escalating situation with COVID-19, we had to postpone until now. Since then, the world has changed remarkably and the pandemic has shone a light on many things, with questions being asked about how we live, work and what we value in society. With this, food, farming and the environment have found themselves firmly in the spotlight. We don't have to look too far back to remember the initial panic as COVID-19 impacted our food supply chains, or the emotive images of empty supermarket shelves as we started the long process of lockdown. Thoughts of food security and building greater resilience in our food and farming systems have subsequently come to the forefront of our minds. Similarly, lockdown has demonstrated the importance of the environment to our health, well-being and future prosperity. Many have found solace in being able to engage with nature, whilst many other aspects of our lives ground to a standstill. This experience has highlighted a growing appetite for change, with widespread calls for a green recovery as we begin to emerge from the pandemic. For example, recent surveys have shown that around 3/4 of people in Northern Ireland now want new laws to better protect nature and climate. Moves such as this will be essential if we are to address the nature and climate crisis. Future farming and land use policies will also be key to enabling this recovery. Our long-term food security and wider prosperity is dependent upon a thriving natural environment and stable climate. Quite simply, an investment in nature-friendly farming is an essential investment for the future. In getting there, it's important that farmers are fully equipped to deliver this change and are properly supported to do so. Our two speakers today will shine a light on some of the ways that this can be achieved in order to secure a more profitable, resilient food and farming system which delivers a better return for farmers, nature, the environment and the public. At this point, I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Chris Clark, who's going to focus on how farming, which helps build natural capital, can help secure greater profitability for farm businesses, along with some of the ways that future agricultural policy can help deliver this. By way of introduction, Chris is a partner in Nethergill Associates, a business management consultancy currently assisting with the prediction and management of future farming uncertainties. A former farm tenant and farm manager, he now has 30 years of business management experience within his own business and advising others. Chris is a co-author of the recently published Less is More report. He is also a member of the Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority, the North Yorkshire Rural Commission, and is chair of the Nature Friendly Farming Network in England. Chris will speak for around 25 minutes with 10 to 15 minutes for questions afterwards. If everyone attending looks at the bottom of their screen, they can ask questions through the chat icon and we'll read them out to Chris afterwards. But that's everything from me. If you'd like to take it away and share your screen, Chris.
Okay, is that sharing okay?
Yep, that looks good.
Good. Good morning, everybody, and thanks very much, Phil, for inviting me to talk today. I'm going to talk about Less is More, a report that was published at the back end of last year and was a culmination of visiting and analysing over 40 different farm businesses. They were mainly marginal and hill farms, but subsequent to that, I've been working on lowland farms, arable and mixed farms as well. Now, what I'm not going to do is to go through the actual numbers that we came up with. Those can be found in the report if you want to go back to that. What I'm going to do is concentrate on the principles of what we found, because the principles are counterintuitive. They're against the received wisdom. They're against what I was taught when I went to agricultural college. And they challenge the current thinking about farm management and farm economics. So the Less is More came about because of the proposition that you can see on your screen, balancing the needs of food, farming and nature. Those three things are inextricably linked. And I hope by the end of this 25 minutes or so, you'll understand why that link is so inextricable. So, balancing the needs of food, farming and nature. What is the primary mission of farming? Well, for me, the primary mission is to produce food. That is what we're about. I am less keen on using farmland for energy crops, but if we're going to produce anything from the land that we actually manage, we have to do it profitably. And there is every indication from government stats that show that farm businesses are not operating profitably, particularly without support. It doesn't matter which stats you look at, there is a huge problem about the robustness and resilience of farm businesses. If we're going to do this profitably, we have to understand that there's going to be a trade-off between that drive for profitability, viability, resilience, and the stress placed on the environment when doing this. And so what we're going to talk about today is that stress, that relationship between driving food production and environment. And this stress is caused by the natural assets that we have available to us. This grass, this fertility is limited, but not only is it limited, it comes as free issue. Now, I never really understood this until about two years ago. I think we're one of the only industries that is given free grass, free fertility. If we do nothing, things grow. So there is an asset there, a part of our farm businesses that is given to us pro bono, gratis, and for nothing. So this report, we looked at over 40 farms, and by the end of this year, I'll be up to between 70 and 80 farms, which I've actually visited and sat round kitchen tables at. So, but this report, the Less is More report, is about over 40 farms. What have we found out? We found out that the economic and commercial performance of farms is not driven by how many livestock you sell from that farm, nor is it driven by the farm size. Now, I completely accept that this is not what you might be wanting to hear or expecting to hear. It's counterintuitive against received wisdom, but that is what we found out. And of all the 40 plus farms and subsequent farms that I'm working with now, they're all exhibiting the same characteristics. Not one farm is showing a different characteristic. So if it's not that that's driving profitability, what is it? There's one thing and one thing only that is driving profitability before support and before other sources of additional income. And on livestock farms, that is the availability of natural grass. And by that I mean natural grass. By natural grass, I mean before fertilizers, before sprays, before overwintering, before buying in this and buying in that. Okay, so the profitability is driven by the availability of natural grass. When that grass runs out, or in the case of lowland or mixed farms, when that grass runs out, we as farmers try to drive production by adding costs. And what we found is that that invariably reverses the profitability of that farm business. We've also found, because we are given this free issue asset from nature, that we should be treating nature as a shareholder. So we're going to be discussing the first 3 points are about P&L, profit and loss account. The fourth bullet point we're talking about now is about the balance sheet. So we're going to be introducing balance sheet items into this discussion, because nature should, in my view, be treated as a shareholder within the farm business, and I'll explain why a bit later on. So what is the evidence that we've accumulated to justify the concept of production not driving profitability? I'm going to show you first a chart. This is the standard economic theory of the firm. This is what I effectively was taught at agricultural college, not quite in this form, but there's, if you take the two axes, The vertical axis is the revenue and cost line, and the horizontal is the output volumes. I'm just getting the pen. The green line is your revenue line, and the red line there is your fixed costs, and your purple line there are your variable costs. Okay. At that point there, with the standard economic theory of the firm, is break even, and beyond that, you make profits. And that is what we try and do in farming, and that was what I was expecting to find when I went and started out visiting all these farms. So in summary, the standard economic theory of the firm, variable costs are linear, and they have a linear relationship with volumes and output. And this implies that there are economies of scale. At some point, at some volume, profit will be made. So this is why, as farmers, we drive production in the belief that we're going to be better off. What have we found out? Well, we found out that the standard economic theory of the firm is actually the realities of economic theory on the farm. We have the same chart with the same axes, the same revenue line, and the same fixed costs, and the same variable costs up to that point. I've then dotted and shaded the variable cost line from beyond that point. Why have I done that? Because what we found is that there is an inflection point. So the variable costs between here and here we've called productive variable costs, and they are associated with the variable costs. Those variable costs are associated with the drive to produce, a drive for the costs associated with naturally available grass or naturally available fertility. And then you go up to here, and we've called these corrective variable costs, and those are the costs that we incur when we drive production beyond the end of the naturally available grass. And that will be fertilizer, feed, additional vet and med, overwintering in hill or livestock farms. Okay, so there's your break-even point at X, and there's the break-back point at Y. So most farms have gone through this profitable area here and are now at this point here. Most of the farms I deal with have gone through that point. Now you have to remember that this is before support, and we'll introduce support a little bit later on. There are very, very few farms where the variable costs break the revenue line and create a break-even point. So what does that mean? Let me get rid of some of this. At that inflection point is the point at which the farm makes the most money, the MSO, the maximum sustainable output, the MSO. It is also the point at which nature benefits from that farm production. So the less is more title came from the fact that every single farm we went onto was beyond the MSO, and if they reduce their yield or their stocking back down to MSO, they would be better off, and by default, the environment and nature would benefit. So, in summary, variable costs in farming are non-linear, and I absolutely accept that this is controversial, but it's true. Not a single farm business that we've been to is exhibiting anything else but non-linear costs, variable costs. This destroys completely the phenomenon of economies of scale. The belief that we can drive production to create more profit in our farms is wrong. And at the point where the variable cost rates change, which is at the MSO, that is the point we ought to be heading for in our businesses. Okay? Now it's worth saying that if you have a farm business up here, in this area here, they need to move to MSO. And one of the problems we're finding is that part of the drive for a particular species or habitat drives the farm business beyond its MSO in an attempt to get that species or habitat. And so we can now calculate the value to the farmer for the need for nature beyond MSO. And also, we can calculate if the farmer is in this area, and we have one farmer in this area because his landlord requires him to have less stock because of grouse shooting, we can also help him calculate the value to him of a reduction in rent. So this MSO is really, really important for calculating where farmers should actually be. And it's also become apparent in the last few months how important it is in calculating where nature should be as well. So I've just brought up one farm. This is not an aggregate or an average, this is one farm, but I can tell you that this is standard. So we have the revenue line, this line here is the revenue line, this line here is the revenue line with support, so the one below is the revenue line without support, this is the revenue line with support, here are your fixed costs down here, and here's your PVC line, your variable cost line there, with the inflection point at that point. So, and here are the CVCs, the additional costs of fertilizer, feed, sprays, etc. And so you can see the margin, the profit margin at current output between there and there, but you can see how it's better at MSO levels there, okay? But you can also see, because this is revenue plus support, what will happen if BPS is reduced or removed over a period of time. This line is going to move down to somewhere here, or even below that, and you can see the effect of that support on that farm. This farm is a standard farm. It's not an average of the whole lot. It is one farm, I accept that, but it is what we're finding. So we talked about 40 plus farms. I've taken a tranche of 28 farms out of that, okay? And what did we find? We found that farm revenues and farm size, there is no relationship between farm size and farm revenues. We have some small farms having higher revenues than some large farms. Is there a relationship between farm revenues and profits? Is the level of farm revenue just an indicator of profit? There is no relationship. We found no relationship between those two things either. More revenue does not necessarily drive profit. Is there a relationship between farm size and maximum sustainable output, MSO? There is no relationship between those things. The grass on hill farms is not a simple matter of acreage. It's to do with elevation and precipitation and latitude and so on. So this poses a real conundrum. What is it that is driving profitability? The drive to profitability comes from the ability of the farmer to get as much out of the naturally available grass as he or she can. That's where it comes from. So that's the P&L side of it. Getting your farm to MSO will make you better off. It will give you more time. It will reduce the stress, and it will improve your nature and your environment within your farm business. So let's move to the balance sheet and talk about natural capital. This has come on from our work on less is more. This is not in the report. This is what we found out subsequently in the last few weeks and few months. As I said right at the start, we should be treating nature as a stakeholder. If we are being given this asset for nothing, it becomes a shareholder within our business. And that bounty that nature delivers brings us cost savings, and it demands no financial return. That doesn't mean that we can take it for nothing for granted. In my view, we should be saying nature is a shareholder in our business, and therefore it is behoven on us not to decapitalize the asset that nature has given us. What it gives us makes it easy to be more commercially profitable, and we've now worked out over the last few weeks a way of calculating a valuation, how to calculate the value of natural capital. And there are three ways we think of calculating natural capital. Real natural capital, which RNC is what we've shortened it to, and this comes about, for example, if there is already a load of work done, a ton of work done on revenue generation from, for example, woodland generating carbon offset fees. We can take that as real natural capital, and that goes on to into the P&L account and is taxable. Then there's imputed natural capital, environmental payments made on the premise that its objectives are for the protection of natural assets. In other words, we can take the environmental stewardship payments on a farm and say that is imputed natural capital. The problem with that is that farm businesses might not have the whole farm in environmental stewardship, might only have 10% of their farm or less, or not even any at all. But the really exciting one is the notional natural capital, where we look at the cost of replacements of fertilizer and feed and hay if we're buying that in, or whatever it is. And we do a calculation to calculate this notional natural capital. It's called notional because although the effects are real, the quantification comes from the notional cost savings. Okay, so this is a calculation done from a set of farm accounts with some nifty algorithms that allow us to do that calculation. They don't actually happen. That's why it's notional. So because this is all quite a complicated thing, and we're doing some work at the moment with over 25 farms looking at the relationship between natural capital, its valuation, and the way we think we can calculate it, and a cover-based approach. So going out on farms, sending ecologists out and doing that, and doing a cover-based approach, and then doing a natural capital valuation. Now, as far as we understand it, at the moment, there is no standard methodology from taking a cover analysis, a sort of a doomsday approach, a doomsday look at habitats, natural assets, etc. There's no, as I understand it, standard methodology to transfer that into a valuation for a farmer. What we've done is calculate that. But we've gone one stage further in the last few weeks, and we've come up with another algorithm which was going to look at the environmental stress index, and ESI is what we've called it. And although we've called it ESI, it should be EESI because it's an economic and environmental stress index. The MSO is the point at which the farm business benefits and nature benefits. So we're looking at that as a stress index. So as we drive production, so the notional natural capital increases up to MSO. So if you can remember that perpendicular line to the left of that, we were below MSO, and we want to drive the farm business using the naturally available fertility, the naturally available grass, to MSO and not beyond it, within reason. So as farmers press for more output, so the notional natural capital increases. The value to the farmer of nature improves. Beyond this, the notional natural capital decreases and can go negative as well. This is the effect of decapitalizing the natural asset. If you go beyond MSO, you will decapitalize the asset that nature has given you. And this reflects the greater stress applied to the natural resources. Okay, so the ESI is designed to replace and simplify the natural capital considerations. And we've defined it as the size of the farm times 1,000 divided by QIS, which is the quasi-income stream, the notional natural capital that is reflected as part of the benefit of that natural capital. Now, I don't have time to go into how that works. Maybe we can come back to that later on. So when we get enough farms on this, and we haven't got enough yet, but we will have soon, I wanted an example, and for me, the Richter scale, how bad or good, if you can call it good, an earthquake is, the Richter scale is what we're heading for here. This is a log-based scale and would reflect the ESI. So, key conclusions. All farms struggle to be profitable without support. We didn't talk about fixed costs, but we've also found that when fixed costs exceed 40% of revenues, no farm is profitable at all. There's no relationship between farm revenues and farm size, farm revenues and farm profits. And in the absence of those relationships, there's a variety of influences that come into play: elevation, land condition, the management of the farm, the practices, the effort, the intensity, how good that farmer is in using the naturally available grass. The MSO also bears no relationship to the size of the farm. Again, it's about elevation, land condition, precipitation. But the MSO does have a deeper significance apart from driving farm profitability. It's the point where the commercial benefits derived from the ownership or stewardship of that farm and natural resources are maximized. Those two things are inextricably linked. And I repeat, every single farm business are exhibiting the same characteristics in some way or another. And we believe that the MSO has a deeper significance, and it can become a measure for natural capital in a farm business. The way forward: move to MSO levels of output. There's nothing that is going to benefit a farm business more than by doing that. Tackle your fixed costs aggressively. Treat and account for nature as a shareholder. If you were a shareholder in my business, you would expect a dividend. Nature doesn't require a dividend. It just requires you not to decapitalize the asset that it's given you. And plot the profits against the environmental stress index. Final slide. The economic and commercial prospects for farms is driven by the availability and quality of natural gas and the ability of that farmer to use that resource effectively. And by plotting the profits of that farm against ESI, we will know the trade-off between the business and the nature. Those two things can be quantified. And if you wanted them to be, and they were accepted, those plots, those charts could become the basis for national farming policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. That was a really interesting presentation and a lot to think about as well. We've got a few questions from members of the audience, but I suppose I wanted to start off and ask a few myself. So obviously in England, there is a large-scale transition towards a new environmental land management scheme, and the agriculture bill is going to receive royal assent soon. So through your work, have you seen a greater consideration of what MSO could play in the future? And a lot of what you're saying, I suppose you've said it yourself, is controversial and runs counter to the conventional wisdom around these things. And what role do you think business advice and training and things like that could play in potentially adopting this at a wider scale?
Right, I'm not sure I remember all those questions, Phil, so you may have to jog me. But let's look at the uptake of this as an idea. So the report was published in November last year. I have tried very hard to have conversations with the English NFU without any success. So at that level, we're struggling. We've had conversations with NGOs, RSPB, National Trusts, Wildlife Trusts, etc. And there is obviously a take-up there, but there is a need for absorption, for appreciation of the implications of an NGO's business model. As I tried to allude to when we looked at the MSO, the non-linear variable cost chart, some NGOs are trying to drive biodiversity beyond the MSO, and the farmer is not being compensated enough for that, and we can now make that calculation. So there is an appreciation at that level, at NGO level. At farm level, we're seeing with the farms we're working with, we're beginning to see a big change. So of the 40+ farms that I was working with pre this time last year, before the report came out, a number of those have accepted the conclusions on their businesses and are making changes. Of the farms we're going to see now, which are new to us and that we are new to them, we are seeing a different appreciation of the effect of support on their farm and what's going to happen if that is removed. And they are wanting to make changes to their farm business, or to consider changes now before 2021 in England, when transition actually begins. I will just add one more thing, Phil, on that maybe again controversially, we are seeing the drive for change in individual farm businesses mainly driven by the women. So there's an interesting dynamic there. So if you're going to target an audience for change, it may not be the male farmer himself. Now, there's some other questions you asked me, but I can't remember.
The next one I wanted to touch on, I suppose, the rollout of advice and support in helping farmers to get to that level.
Really, really critical advice. Farming is an isolated, lonely place to be. Making changes to a farm business in a way that I am advocating is tricky, because you're on your own quite often and there's no one to turn to. But what you mustn't do is go to someone who's going to tell you to drive your production, because that is going to exacerbate the problem. So we need people who understand the principle of what we're talking about here.
Perfect, thank you. I'll go through some of the questions that have been asked by the audience, so thanks for putting those through, guys. One of the ones that's come through was looking at the study and how many smaller family farms with another generation coming in after that were visited, and how does the concept potentially apply to them. And I recognise, I suppose, adding on to that, that you focused on marginal areas. So does this concept, or have you looked at any other farming systems, so for example lowland livestock, where MSO potentially could be incorporated, or is it different depending on the landscape and the context?
So I can't remember the numbers for the 40+ farms, but of the Nidderdale farms, of the 28 Nidderdale farms, 4 were turning over 150,000 pounds. Then there was 10 turning over between 50 and 150,000, and the rest were turning over under 50,000 pounds. And of those 28 farms, I think all bar one had a generation coming on behind them. And I've got to be diplomatic about this and say this really quite carefully, but the generation coming on behind were more appreciating of this as a concept if they'd gone to college. If they hadn't gone to college, it was very much more difficult to appreciate this sort of approach. Their drive was a big tractor or a big bit of kit. So the younger generation generally more appreciative of this, more accepting of it.
Interesting. And I suppose
so yeah, sorry, and your last bit. So we're now working with lowland farms. I'm working in Dorset and Surrey with lowland farms, and I've done some other work in Wales, and we're finding exactly the same characteristics. The drive to add costs may not be latitude, elevation and precipitation, but it is geology and soil structure, and whether you're on grade 3 land or on grade 1 land. I've done no work on grade 1 and grade 2 land. I've done a lot of work on farms with grade 3 and grade 2 land. Same thing's happening.
It's really interesting. So it's a concept that can be applied to a number of different systems potentially. Just touching on another question that's come through. So has there been any way to look at the breed of livestock and how that influences MSO? So for example, hardier breeds that you're able to overwinter in upland environments and don't require housing or a large amount of additional feed, for example?
So theoretically, you need to reduce your CVCs, your corrective variable costs. You need to reduce particularly the purchase concentrates. Now, one way to do that is to move to native breeds, because they can live outside, the costs are less, the value of the animal is less, but I'm not interested in revenue, I'm interested in margin. Okay, I don't want the farmers I work with, to be busy fools. I'm interested in margin. So these native breeds have the ability not to take up additional variable costs in the form of expensive silage or purchase concentrates or overwintering. You know, sending your sheep away for overwintering adds additional costs. So, and in theory, that's where it is. In practice, we're now seeing farmers trying this, and there's 4 or 5 that are going down this route. There's some high-profile ones. You know, one in particular is Neil Heseltine in the Yorkshire Dales. He's been going down this route for some time. He did it intuitively rather than through me advising him to do that, although I've worked with him on this. So native breeds, in my view, are fundamental to going down a route that makes you more profitable. And I also believe, because I've been 40 years in farming or ancillary industries, I also believe that they bring additional, the 3 T's, taste, texture and tenderness to meat, but that's a separate issue.
Thank you. We've got another one. So I suppose historically, was there a point in time where farmers were more likely to be working at MSO? So for example, the interwar years are often cited as a more naturally balanced farming system. But from your perspective, do you think that this was the case?
But it's certainly, I've done no analysis, but with all the conclusions that we've drawn, that it would indicate that if you don't have sprays, you don't have fertilizer, you don't buy in purchase concentrates, you are self-sufficient, more self-sufficient, and you collaborate with your next door neighbor in a way that we don't do anymore, you will be better off. Perfect.
A couple more here. So there's 2 here that I suppose are linked. So one of the questions is, do farm subsidies artificially impact upon natural capital, or artificially impact the business as well? And then there's another question, I think there may be a bit of a link here. So surely farmers will increase production while it remains profitable. So maximum profitability would surely be meaningless to them as I suppose, in a unit of production perspective, whilst profit is diminishing. So, but you're still getting additional income, even if you're doing that. So disincentivizing this approach would be very difficult. And I think there's a link between the current farm support system as well.
So I think that's a wrong assumption, because farms have a non-linear variable cost. It doesn't matter whether you are supported or unsupported. You cannot drive production using support and make more money by doing so. You want to take that support and go to MSO anyway, and just accept the money that you get. Don't use that support to fund additional variable costs. Don't go through that break-back point. So whether you have support or not, if you look at your farm accounts analytically and in a way that you try and do it conservatively, you will make more money with support or without support moving to MSO because of the non-linear variable cost.
Okay, thank you. And another one, a couple more here, so, and then we'll move on. But so there's another questions come in. Are there differences in attitude to MSO between tenants and landowners? So tenants see the value in the livestock, and there's a reluctance to potentially reduce numbers.
There is a difference, but not in the way that has been suggested. So I am now engaged, I have been engaged by a number of landowners who are really worried that their tenants are not going to be successful post-Brexit, post the reduction, the transition in BPS in England. And their business is predicated on rental incomes. Now, if a farm business is not successful, they will not be able to justify the amount of rent that they're currently charging. So they are, that's how they're approaching it. It's important for the tenant to go to MSO, because there is an absolute likelihood that they will have the option to reduce their fixed costs moving to MSO. And not only that, they get more time for themselves, they have a better quality of life, they will be better off. Now, the support mechanism is allowing farmers not to run their business in the way that gives best value for the public funding that is currently given to them. Moving to MSO will allow farmers to justify that payment that they can't do it in that way currently.
Okay. Thank you. And just another question in terms of the work you're doing in mapping MSO and delivering natural capital and benefits at scale. How do you think that could be applied at I suppose, a strategic land use level? And then the other question too is, do you think there are examples where undergrazing is an issue, for example, for a delivery of an environmental outcome, or the fact that farmers are maybe operating under MSO? And you touched on it a little bit in terms of the role of public support if you're trying to deliver that outcome. So say, for example, breeding waders or another species which requires you to go above MSO, how do future payments factor into that?
So the MSO allows us to calculate an environmental stress index. And again, what we found out has surprised us. You know, I'm not a rewilder, but I'm sympathetic to it. But we've now found that if you don't understand where your MSO is and have enough livestock to move to that MSO, your natural capital will be decapitalized in a similar way, but not quite the same way as if you go over your MSO, then you will decapitalize your natural capital that way as well. So the MSO, there will be a zone. There won't be a natural line or a point. There'll be a zone through which I believe farm businesses should actually be in. So understanding the relationship between the stress caused by driving production on the environment is critical, and there's a way to actually measure that through ESI. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, and I can see how that could potentially be applied across a region or a country, and targeted based on the data that you have and the understanding that you have. Last question, and then we'll move on. Thank you everyone for being so involved. So there's a question here from one of the attendees. If we lower production as a country that is only 60% self-sufficient, do we not raise imports from even more intensive systems overseas? And how does that kind of factor into things around MSO?
So we are 60%, I think it's 64%, but I think we are 70 or 75% self-sufficient in red meat, as I understand it. So we have as a nation to decide at what point do we want to be self-sufficient. Is it 100%? Is it 90, 80, 70, 60? What is it? And again, as I understand it, we haven't been self-sufficient in food since the late 1500s. We have imported food forever. We are a trading nation. That's what we do. Now, we have to, as an industry, understand that we produce the best food in the world. And yet, we don't market it as such to society within the UK. We should be taking more control as farm businesses of that supply chain, getting the abattoirs sorted out, getting the supermarkets sorted out, and taking control, branding and offering, giving a market offer that our food that we produce is justifies, which is not currently done.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Chris. And thanks for the whole presentation. A lot of interesting stuff, and I think it's definitely something that could be factored in the future, and trying to understand how it could apply in Northern Ireland. With, I suppose, there's 2/3 of our landscape are currently less favoured areas. We have a lot of HNV areas as well, so it's a concept that could potentially be key within each of those. So move on here. So we've seen through Chris's work how certain farm businesses can achieve better margins through adopting a business approach which incorporates natural capital in all its decision making. But you touched on it yourself, Chris. In the majority of these instances, public support will still be crucial in ensuring that farm businesses remain viable. And it will be an important element moving forward. But again, we've touched on environmental issues, so it'll be really important that this support helps deliver for the environment, with particular schemes focused on delivering specific high quality environmental outcomes. So at present, there are a number of agri-environment schemes which seek to incentivise these. For example, the EFS and the previous NIMCS, they've delivered some impressive results, but however, they haven't been able to restore nature or address other pressing environmental issues at the scale required. In the future, land management schemes will have to play a far greater role than they do currently, with appropriate levels of funding matched at the scale of need. Importantly, though, they'll also have to be an attractive investment for farmers to achieve the required level of engagement needed. Currently, the majority of EU agri-environment schemes focus on the delivery of specific actions, with payment being administered based on this. And whilst I've touched on the fact that they are capable of delivering outcomes in some cases, they have been criticised by farming stakeholders as being overly prescriptive and not providing the level of financial incentive necessary to participate with them. Similarly, other commentators have referenced the fact that payment is administered regardless of whether a specific outcome has been met, raising questions around value for money. So then this is a question, how can we create schemes that deliver both high quality environmental outcomes, but also incentivize farmers for delivering them, whilst fully engaging farmers in this process? Our next speaker, James Moran, is going to speak about how some of the work that's taken place in Republic, trialling innovative results-based payment schemes. He'll highlight the lessons learned and what role these types of land management schemes could play in incentivising nature-friendly farming in the future. James is a lecturer in ecology and biology at GMIT, teaching on agriculture and environment-related programs. His research and outreach work concentrates on sustainable agricultural systems. Research areas include rural development, agri-environmental schemes, and high nature value farmland. His outreach work focuses on improving agriculture policy and practice, with a particular focus on the Common Agriculture Policy. He is a member of the National Biodiversity Forum, the National Rural Network Subcommittee on Biodiversity, Environmental Challenges and Life Programmes, and board member of the European Results-Based Payments Network, all while leading the Agroecology and Rural Development Research Group at GMIT. So James, I'd like to welcome you to everyone, and if you could share your screen there, and same as before, around 25 minutes of a presentation, followed by some questions afterwards.
Okay, thanks very much, Phil. Hopefully you can all hear me, and good morning. I'll just share my screen there. That has worked, has it?
Yeah, that's perfect.
All right, great. First of all, before I go on my own talk, I must say I agree with what Chris has said, and I can see a lot of applicability of that concept and merging of what I'm going to talk about now. Essentially, what I'm going to talk about this morning just get the screen to move on. So in today's webinar, I want to outline how results-based payments create a market for public goods. So I'll first outline where results-based payment schemes fit into our overall agri-environmental climate scheme architecture in Ireland. Then I'll look at the development of hybrid results-based payments, essentially where we combine results-based payments and our traditional action-based approach, using them as supporting actions within our results-based framework. And I'll also highlight that there is a common design framework emerging across a range of projects that we work on, both in Ireland, but also in a European context. First, I'd also like to highlight that this work is the work of a number of colleagues within the Agroecology and Rural Development Research Group, who are working on a range of projects. So I'd just like to acknowledge them first, and also to highlight that the work I'm presenting today is the work and of the development of these hybrid results-based approaches on a range of projects, from the Burn Programme, Iron Life Programme, Hen Harrier EIPs, Pearl Mussel EIPs, and many of these programmes, they exist to find solutions to some of the most challenging agri-environmental priorities in the country. So things that have been intractable with our national agriculture, our agri-environmental schemes, these are the projects that are dealing with these very difficult challenges, and in my mind have proven themselves to come up with solutions to these problems. So I want to outline how these results-based create a market for public goods. And you can see in this slide here, I just have a slide here of the range of nature values of agricultural land in an Irish context. And as in Northern Ireland and much of the UK, the agricultural systems are dominated by pasture land, but it's quite diverse in terms of its land types and intensity of use. Some work we did a couple of years ago, funded by the Department of Agriculture and with colleagues in Teagasc, we mapped the nature value of agricultural land across the country at electrical district areas, at small area statistics. And basically what we've done here is we combined the cover of semi-natural vegetation, the stocking rate as an indicator of intensity of production, amount of hedgerows, diversity of soils, and amount of water courses on farms. And what we have seen in that map is that we have a range of nature values, with the high nature value farmland highlighted in green. These areas have natural constraints on food production, compared to the areas in blue, and which have fewer natural constraints and are dominated by intensive pasture and arable systems. So we have extensive pasture in the west and northwest, intensive pasture and arable systems in the southeast. And we believe that the results-based payment schemes are a central component of designing our overall agricultural systems that will target incentives and design them to match the capacity of the land to produce a range of ecosystem services. So we might think that some of the areas in blue will concentrate on food and fibre provisioning ecosystem services, while actually still maintaining the supporting services of pollination, carbon sequestration and water regulation and water quality. But then the areas in the northwest, basically the food and fibre will be less of a product from these lands, and what should be the main products are the nature values, pollination, carbon sequestration, water regulation and water quality, etc. So it's a matter of designing systems, both functioning food and fibre markets, but also markets for public goods that essentially raise the profitability and viability of all these farming systems across the country. My transition in slides is quite slow. I think it's to do with my internet connection speeds here in the west of Ireland.
No problem, no problem.
Right. So in terms of, first of all, our overall structure of our agri-environmental climate measures in the Rural Development Programme, I want to highlight that still in Ireland, in the Republic of Ireland, most of our agri-environmental scheme money is spent on our traditional action-based approach. So we spend approximately 1.4 billion over the programming period on our green low carbon agri-environmental scheme. This is a menu type scheme with priority access to those farms with priority in environmental assets. So essentially the farms with Natura 2000 lands, specifically listed farmland birds, common land areas, high status waters under the Water Framework Directive, for example, get priority access into the agri-environmental scheme, and there's a related list of actions that these farmers must undertake when they have these assets. Then next, if farmers undertake actions to so basically combat challenges around vulnerable water areas, look at minimum tillage or low emission slurry spreading, they get access under tier 2, and then everybody else gets access as long as the budget hasn't run out if they're just adopting general environmental actions like generic bird boxes, maybe new hedgerows, have maybe extensification of permanent pasture with low input permanent pasture, for example. Then our results-based payments components, it's only approximately 70 million over the current programming period. This is made up of our burn program, which is a fully fledged results-based payment scheme, a hybrid approach in the burn that has been in operation for over 10 years. And then a series of innovative pilot projects funded under the European Innovation Partnership operational groups of the CAP that basically is trying to test and expand the burn program to see how applicable it is in the wider agricultural landscape. And it is assumed that if this approach works, that we'll see as results-based payments as a much wider component of our agri-environmental scheme architecture post 2020. So these are basically our examples of our 23 European innovation partnerships. Now they're dealing with an awful lot more wider issues than agri-environment, but I have a number of them highlighted there that are testing in particular the results-based payments approach. But in an Irish context in general, things like LIFE projects, the Burn programme itself, we've had results-based agri-environment pilot schemes funded by Europe with sister projects in the UK and Romania and Spain. These have all played a major part in the development of the Irish approach to the implementation of results-based payment schemes. And now this has been further developed through the European Innovation Partnerships. And these is now dealing with a much wider range of landscapes, from upland extensive peatland and moorland systems in the hen harrier programme and the pearl mussel programme, intensive dairy environments in the Bride project, and also a quite intensive area in the Aloe project as well. And then looking at a wide range of farming types in the protecting farmland pollinators approach. So at this stage, we have basically, to my mind, we're testing results-based payments in an exhaustive list of landscape types and farming types in the Irish context. Now, I don't want you to look at this slide in too much detail. There's quite an amount on it. But what I want to highlight is we have a book published on farming for nature results-based payments that's available on the Teagasc and National Parks and Wildlife Service websites. And Phil might be able to send around a link to that later on, that basically summarises the experience of results-based payments in an Irish context up to approximately 2018. So it doesn't include some of our recent experience on the European Innovation Partnerships. But within this, what we highlight is what results-based payments are, how they compare with management-based approaches, and where we see this going into the future. But in simple terms, results-based payments are agri-environmental schemes where the payments are directly linked to the delivery of the result rather than actions expected to deliver the result. The main difference in the two approaches relate to the link between the payments and the results. In the results-based payments, you very much have tied the payment to what the farmer is delivering on the ground, the same as any traditional market. The more product you produce, the higher quality that product, the more money you get. In the management or action-based approach, based on the design of the program, you have to assume that farmers get a list of prescriptions, a list of actions, and you assume that they give rise to the result. And in many contexts, this doesn't actually work, particularly for complex targets like biodiversity. But also in the results-based program, it's much more flexible. The farmer has freedom to choose what management he puts in place to actually deliver the result. There's some advantages such as inbuilt monitoring. There's been a lot of discussion about the administration costs of these because the fields and basically product needs to be scored each year. But what we're finding in general is the administrative costs are quite similar to higher tier agri-environmental schemes, are often slightly lower than that. One of the big barriers to the approach is familiarity with the approach among farmers and the wider sector and the departments and administrators as well. Also, it very much needs specialist advisory support and training. And the level of risk is seen as slightly higher for the farmer, because with the action-based approach, once you do your lists of prescriptions, your list of actions, whether they achieve the result or not, you still get paid. But in the results-based payment, you have to have a situation where if you don't deliver the results, you don't get paid. But we reduce these risks in the design of our results-based payment schemes, as you will see in a minute. And this is often why in Irish context as well, with experience, we often combine the best of the action-based approach with the results-based approach to reduce some of these risks as well. So one of the things I'd like to emphasize here, this is not ideologically driven, that it's all about results-based payments and we're throwing basically action-based out with the bathwater. We're combining both approaches, and we see this as a tool to actually fix some of the issues we have with our traditional approach to agri-environment schemes. This is this five-step design process we came up with as part of the results-based pilots that were funded by the European Commission. Essentially, it has a five-step process where, first of all, we select our biodiversity targets, our environmental targets for the program. whether these be breeding waders, species-rich grasslands. In some of our newer programs, we're looking at water quality targets and also carbon and climate targets within this. Then within that, now a lot of these targets are set already by legislative requirements or wider environmental policy targets and objectives as well. Then we design scoring systems at farm level and at field level in particular, using a set of results indicators that are used to measure the achievement of the results by the farmer. We also put in place a range of management guidelines that would assist the farmer to actually achieve the results. And then we cost the approach and set our payment levels to make sure we incentivize farmers to move from the lower quality to the higher quality, just delivering higher quantities and quality of the desired product and meeting the objectives. Then in general, they're implemented using a simple farm plan. It's generally just a map of the eligible areas within the farm, highlighting the existing scores on them parcels, and then the farmer just gets a printout each year with his payment of what the current score of the fields, and you might actually produce some management guidelines to go along with that as well. Then of course we have monitoring and evaluation of this, and we have a continuous cycle of improvement within the 5-step design process. So some of this is quite similar to how you design a traditional agri-environmental scheme as well, but the key difference here is the scoring system and the results indicators that are used to measure the achievement of the objectives and are also used as a basis for costing. So I'm going to concentrate quite a bit of the rest of the presentation on the design of the scoring systems. So in Ireland to date, we have focused our results-based projects on biodiversity targets and associated ecosystem services that are basically compatible with biodiversity. So as the biodiversity increases, habitat quality increases, in general water quality and water storage would also increase. We are also finding that soil carbon increases in vast majority of these habitats where we have a higher condition score, and also they're more valuable for pollination and pollination services. So these are our main targets at the moment: habitat quality, water, soil carbon, and pollination. So one of the things we have to design is we have to have results indicators that measure the results. Now farmers are used of actually measuring the results and how productive their system is. They use maybe a rising plate to measure grass measurement and looking at their yields on their farms. They condition score their animals to make sure the nutrition is right and they're achieving their production targets in terms of their beef animals. So the analogy I like to use for farmers here is when a beef farmer, for example, is condition scoring his animals, he looks at the tail, the pin bones, and the amount of fleshing over the ribs, for example. So the tail, the pins, and the ribs are your results indicators. We do exactly the same thing in the fields or the hedgerows in a results-based payment. We pick a number of visible indicators within the fields, and these are scored from low, medium to high, and you result in an overall 10-point score for the field or feature. So it's quite similar to what farmers would be doing for their production of grass, their production of beef animals, also in milk production in terms of you use your indicators of protein and milk solids as your results indicator. So this is the important thing here. When we design our results indicators for results-based payments, they need to reflect the variation, the condition of the target, and occur consistently across the target area. They need to respond to the agricultural management, and in particular, they need to be within the farmer's control. They also need to be easily understood by the farmer, the advisor, and the paying agency, maybe after some training. And often when we're looking at multiple targets on a particular parcel, be they carbon, water, and biodiversity combined, the optimum combination of weighting and results indicators needs to reflect their relative importance to the targets or targets. It needs to minimize complexity, provide robust measures of quality, and also provide an early warning system and clear signals to the farmer on the success of the current management. So these are things that have been known about results indicators since these have been first researched since the 1990s and early 2000s. And we're just making sure that we take these principles and make sure that all our results indicators are measured and meet these characteristics. So taking these characteristics into account, the foundation of our results-based payment projects are various field scoring systems. These are either 10 or 5-point scoring systems using a combination of results indicators. Generally, to date, we've had two broad categories of indicators used. The first ones are measuring the ecological quality, and these are generally a set of positive and negative indicator species and their cover in a particular parcel, combined with the vegetation structure of a field. And then we have other indicators that measure the hydrological and soil conditions and a range of damaging activities. Now, we must note that we don't include all these indicators in every system, as we'll illustrate in a few minutes. But we have a range of scorecards developed at this stage in the Republic of Ireland on grasslands, heathlands, peatlands, scrubland and woodland and field boundaries, the major land covers in the agricultural landscape. So this is an example here of our field level results indicators from the Hen Harrier program. And you can see the results indicator. So it's possible to incorporate a wide range of ecosystem services into the scorecard. So this one in particular is looking at ecological integrity or ecological quality for the hen harrier and wider biodiversity in the upland areas. It also looks at soil integrity, and particularly in relation to carbon and amount of bare soil in the area. It also looks at hydrological integrity in terms of the quality of drainage features and damage to water features and the degree of naturalness of these. So in this example from the Hen Harrier project, we have a number of results indicators that measure these range of targets. And these three indicators, these three broad sets of indicators generally combine to give us about 80% of the available points. And you can see here, it's not very clear, but these are all available on the project websites as well. Generally, they're measured across 3 to 5 levels, so poor, moderate, and good, for things like numbers of plant indicators or amount of bare soil, for example. Then these are combined with negative plant indicators, which generally give 20% of the available points. It's important here to note that many of these indicators have negative weightings, and you can lose a lot of points if scoring badly on these indicators. So these are generally things that you would have to, they're basic legislative requirements, and they're considered good agriculture and environmental conditions. So they're paid for under the basic payment scheme at the moment. But one of the things we wanted to do within our field-based scoring systems, we wanted to ensure that if a farmer scored his field, that all the legislative requirements are taken into account. And a farmer can be sure once he's scoring above a 4 or a 5 in these areas, he's meeting all the legislative requirements in regards to Water Framework Directive, Nitrates Directive, good baseline conditionality for his basic payment, as well as meeting the conditions for the BPS. So it's a means of simplifying the whole process into the scorecard system. And these also give clear signals to the farmer, and particularly including the damaging activities. You don't get additional points for them, but you certainly will lose points if they're occurring. They improve the link between the farmer's management and the overall scoring system. Now, one of the key messages on these field level indicators and these field level scorecards, they need to be simple, but not too simple. In other words, they need to be evidence-based. And people often ask, well, where do we start? We have an awful lot of this monitoring already going on farms, particularly under the Natura 2000. We have monitoring systems, some of them quite complex, developed for a range of different land types and habitat types and biodiversity targets across Europe. And one of the things we often start with is we start with the indicator species lists for the monitoring of Natura 2000, and we cut these to the bone, reduce them down completely to essential indicators to measure the quality we're interested in. We also look at can we complement these species indicators with simple ecosystem structure variables, such as the amount of wet features in a farm or the overall vegetation structure of a field. And sometimes we actually replace the actual plant indicators completely with ecosystem structure variables, depending what the target is. then it's important then we weight the indicators and make it the link to the payment structure. One of the things with the payment structure is here on the graph on the right hand side, we often don't pay for fields until they get to a score of 4. The reason being that in our scoring system, generally at 0.3 in a field score, you're just basically at good agricultural and environmental condition. You're meeting your baseline conditionality for your current cap payments. But then once you start going above that, there's quite a substantial jump in payment. Then you stay at maybe a relatively set payment when you're on the average scores of around 4, 5, and 6. But once you get into top quality scores and delivering high quality product, there's a big jump in payments again. So at all times here, it's the way you design the field scoring system. It's understandable by the farmer, but also how the payment system matches to the field scoring system are very important in terms of how you influence farmer behavior and how you influence their ambition to move from one point of delivery to another point of delivery on the scale. Now, as well as having these field level indicators, for many of our targets, it's very important to have an overall farm level indicator. This is particularly for the water quality targets. So our scorecards concentrate on field or parcel level, but the whole farmer landscape level approach is often needed to deliver particular environmental targets. In our pearl mussel and water example, which is very important here to deliver high quality water and also regulate the flow of water for the pearl mussel, which is a highly sensitive freshwater species. Here, the various habitat scorecards are combined with an overall farm assessment, which cover farmyard risk assessments, risk of nutrient and sediment loss, and flow regulation on the farm overall. So in this situation, I'll just show you it in the illustration I have up here. In this example here, you could have a situation where many parts of the farm, when a farmer goes into the results-based payment scheme initially, are in excellent ecological condition, but there are still major threats to water quality and flow. So you can see here on the top picture here that in this farm here, it's a mix of improved agricultural grasslands, semi-natural pastures in various quality states, some very important species-rich, orchid-rich grasslands that are scoring 10 out of 10. And then there's also upland commonage areas. This farmer has shares in 2 separate commonages at either end of the farm. One of them is in excellent condition, but the other one is in moderate or quite poor condition. So in this situation, the farmer could go in, we could score all their fields, and they might be quite happy to stay at the status quo and say, oh, well, I have a couple of farms that are 8 out of 10, fields that are 8 out of 10, a few that are 10 out of 10, I'll accept my current payment. But then that won't improve the situation for the pearl mussel within the river, because we have issues here around silt coming from these poached areas. We have direct drainage runoff directly into the water course here. We have direct access by cattle into the system here. Things that are not dealt with in our field scoring system. So here what's put in place is a number of supporting actions. So we address these issues. Here the whole farm score would be about a 0.3. So a farmer will be using 70% of his available score because of these issues here. But these are issues that can be dealt with quite quickly in the space of 12 months if the correct supports are given to the farmer. So in this situation, we give supports, particularly in the first year, to plug some of the drains to prevent the runoff, maybe managing this runoff with sluices as well within this area, or blocking some of the drains. We have put in cattle drinking water infrastructure, fencing off riparian zones, controlling rhododendron and invasive species on the peatland areas here, which would be high sort of capital outlays for the farm originally, but they get support for doing that. And then the whole system is scored again, and the field scores are higher. Generally speaking, a farm in this level of good condition would have a farm level assessment of 1.2. So, and rather than getting a penalty or what the farmer would see as a penalty of reduction of 0.7, the farmer gets a bonus of 20%. When we ran this for the first year, of course, some of the farmers that got there wasn't many of them now, it's very, very limited, that got this 0.3 of a score. But the first thing, they were obviously quite angry, first of all, that they were losing quite a bit amount of money. But then once they understood the system, they said, right, what do I need to do to actually solve this problem? And generally speaking, the money that they lost out on in the 0.7, if they'd done the appropriate actions, they got that money back in supporting actions to remedy the issues. Now, another situation here we have basically is our hen harrier project. It's a slightly different example again. Here we wanted to put a value on a specific target endangered species. This is the hen harrier species itself. We have large areas of special protection area designated for this species in the Republic of Ireland. It's in a precarious state in terms of there's only 150 breeding pairs left. It's high threat of extinction. Also, there's natural variation in the annual numbers that are influenced by factors outside the farmer's control. So the majority of the payment is focused on factors within their control. So we pay mostly for habitat quality of their fields and the parcels, but also we wanted to put a direct value on the species itself. So here within this, the project team have come up with a bonus payment for all farmers in the target area. And this bonus payment works along the lines of if there's targets set for the bird population numbers in an SPA area. If these targets are reached in terms of numbers of nests or numbers of pairs fledged, the actual farmers in that area share in the bonus based on the fact that if they have fields greater than a score of 6, they all get a share in the bonus payment. So all these farmers get their results-based payment on their habitat quality, the same as in the pearl mussel project and the burn project, but they also get a bonus payment at the end of the year in generally it's October, November, or just in early December. So they see this as a Christmas bonus linked to the fledging rates. Now this has created huge interest. It's not a huge amount of the overall budget, but it's coming at a very important time for the farmers when they're not getting any other payments at that time. And the farmers, this has basically reduced persecution of this species to 0 in the first year of this program. So there's been absolutely no persecution recorded for the hen harrier in that area in the first year of the program. Now, this is not to say that the farmers were the ones doing the persecution of the bird, but you have a large population of the rural community now actively protecting the bird as one of their key natural assets on their farms. And generally speaking, people won't take out a bird if there's 100 farmers in an area that are invested in it and protecting in it as well. So that has been hugely important. So it's a key sort of subtle design change to the program that has been hugely important. So we can see here there's overall 3 payment models have evolved in the Republic of Ireland. Our simplest one is our hybrid results-based payments combined with some supporting actions which takes place on the Burren and the Aran Islands based on the habitat quality scorecards. Then we have a multiplier, a whole farm assessment multiplier, where we have water quality targets, as in the pearl mussel project, again combined with supporting actions. And then when we have a rare and endangered species where that basically fluctuates naturally and it's unfair to tie most of the payments to that species, we have this bonus payment approach for specific high priority target areas or target species. Now, in terms of the results measurement, the scorecards are basically taken by the advisor and the farmer employs an advisor to actually measure the results. There's training of advisors and farmers on an annual basis. These are a mix of mandatory and voluntary sessions. Now, we have trialled farmer self-assessment, and we're particularly looking at the possibility of reducing the need for advisor submission or scoring to every 3 years and self-declaration by the farmer annually. But generally, we found that this can work quite well once the baseline is established and farmers know in particular in a ballpark figure where their field scores. But generally, we find that farmers could be quite conservative and they generally underscored. They didn't want to get into an over-claim situations, and the majority of them prefer to have the advisor support. Then in terms of the results verification, these in general are verified by a local project team. There's 100% admin checks for anomalies by the project officers when the scorecards are submitted. Now, generally speaking, we have only about 5 to 30% on-farm inspections, the same as any other program, but sometimes they're higher in the first year to maintain or to establish a good baseline. Then after that, our inspection process is risk-based, and there's a random component to the selection of farms for inspection as well. once these basic admin checks have been undertaken by the local project team, they're submitted to the paying agency for the payment claim. Then the paying agency does a 10% check, and often they ask for a full score report from the local project team. Now, in many of our larger projects, we have GIS and apps developed, so these full score reports can be generated automatically by the press of a button. And then also the paying agency conducts witnessed audits with the local project team on a number of farms as well. So there's a quite robust monitoring and verification system put in place as well at the moment. We also have a range of research projects that are looking at these field-based scoring systems and looking at developing novel measures for future agri-environmental climate schemes. And in particular, they're looking at the range of ecosystem services and how increases in pollination, pest control, carbon storage, soil health compare to our existing 10-point scoring systems. And our provisional results of testing the scoring systems are highlighting that in general, particularly in the peatland, heathland and grassland habitats, generally as the score moves from the midpoint in the scale up to 7, 8s and 9s, you're getting increases in soil health, carbon storage and pollination services on these farms also. So this improves the cost benefit analysis, particularly the benefits if you have multiple benefits delivered from the same scoring system. In terms of how the farmers actually view this, now a lot depends on the socio-cultural context in which the results-based payments have been introduced, farmers' previous experience, good or bad, with agri-environmental schemes and with administrations. Now this has been tested in a wide number of areas across Europe. In Ireland, we have, in particular, we wanted to test the burn approach in an area completely different from the burn. So we tested it in the wet grasslands of Leitrim, the flooded meadows of the Shannon Callows, and just to, in our own minds, to challenge ourselves and to prove it would work. We also tested it on the almonds vineyards of Navarra in northern Spain as well. And I can say with confidence that the 10-point scoring systems works in all these areas. But essentially how it actually, the interactions with the farmer were quite different in terms of how you set up the private institutions, the government, the advisory and education services around it. This would be particularly adapted to the socio-cultural context and regional context in which it's introduced. But generally these are comments from some of our farmers across basically Ireland and Spain, and we're getting similar comments from the farmers now in the Hen Harrier programme, the Pearl Mussel programme and other programmes under our EIPs. So they generally feel that a well-designed, locally adapted and flexible agri-environmental scheme will improve their engagement in the delivery of the targets. The farmers like the principle that farmers producing higher quality environmental products are rewarded with higher payments, and it really much attests to farmers are at the end of the day producers, and within this they feel that they are producers as well, and we're not going into them and saying, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, you're doing this bad, you have to do this better. You know, it's basically saying, we need this product or service from your land. We feel that your land is best placed to produce this. This is how much we'll pay you if you produce a product at this level or at this level. And then the farmer goes away with his advisor with support from the project teams and collectively work out the best way of actually producing the product that best fits into their overall farm business. So they feel that these schemes can also make them more conscious about positive environment management in general.
James, we want to leave a little bit of time for questions if we can wrap up the next few minutes.
Just these last two slides. One of the things I want to emphasize is that we have a lot of resources developed. There's an awful lot of information, as you can see in this, and these are all on a range of websites that I can give to Phil again, and he can send on to the participants as well. But also we've developed a number of applications that make the actual scoring on farm an awful lot easier for advisors and farmers under a range of projects. So just to finish off, one of the things we've looked at is we think of this as a well-designed car. It should be simple to drive by the farmers and the advisors. We've essentially looked under the hood here, and it looks quite complex under the hood. But if you use funding strategically, particularly to trial and test these with farmers, you can come up with quite good systems. You use your LIFE programs. Maybe they're looking at this under the ELMS programs in England at the moment. We see that there's a common design approach possible across diverse landscapes, but time and expertise are required to design the scoring systems. It also needs an integrated local farm advisory system. And also use of technology is very important for improving the efficiencies. But also one thing I'd like to emphasize, this is part of a wider remit in Ireland, that we want to shape a new narrative around farming and nature. And the results-based payments have led to new product development. There's opportunities for labelling and eco-labelling of products on these farms as well. And we also have Farming for Nature Awards, now sponsored by Board BIA since 2008, that actually basically appeals to basically the sense of pride farmers have in producing these products as well. So I'd just like to thank you, and just to remind you that we have a European network now as well, that where you can contact a number of experts and specialists on results-based payments if you want to find out more information about these programs across a range of European member states.
Brilliant, thank you, James. That was
sorry I went over time. I was having a lot of trouble trying to move between slides. My internet connection was causing me problems, would have been intermittent here at times.
Oh, no worries, no worries. And it was, no, I thought it was great, and a lot of information, a lot of really interesting insight as well. Yeah, open the floor to questions. I just had one from myself as well. Have you seen from the adoption of these schemes a different appreciation and I suppose understanding of the landscape from the farmers in terms of the assets that they have? Has that changed, I suppose, perceptions and yeah, their perspective on that?
Yeah, it has changed it hugely, in particular under our national approach, particularly under the eligibility rules for the Common Agricultural Policy. A lot of the areas that we would score quite highly in terms of maybe areas of semi-natural woodland, taller and wider hedgerows, good field margins, would be ineligible in some of our basic payments, you know. So in the farm system overall, they were seen as worthless or valueless, you know. So we come in with this system, and some of the fields that the farmers seen as maybe their lowest quality and lowest value to their farm business, now we're right up there in terms of their highest quality products. So straight away, it changed their attitudes of them fields from basically worthless to valuable assets. And that's one of the things one of the farmers said, particularly farmers that had marsh fritillary butterfly on their land. They said, oh God, I never even knew the butterfly was on my land. I knew it was designated, or there was some legal things, and they told me I couldn't do this and that. But no one ever showed me the butterfly before. And sure, we walked down to his farm, and he never walked onto these fields much because he wasn't managing them too much, because they were essentially seen as worthless in the overall farm system. When we went through the farm, he saw the marsh fritillary butterfly, and then he associated this with value, and he concentrated then the management of his grazing on this. He was using that forage resource more integrated within his overall farm system. And he comes back, and I remember him talking to a few farmers, and he said, God, he says, that bloody butterfly that we were complaining about before, he says, now it's one of the most valuable livestock I have on my farm. We need to start looking at the livestock units of this butterfly.
Completely different, a switching almost of what you can value and what can give you a return as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's really interesting. One of the questions coming through here is about farmer expertise and ensuring that is harnessed within the schemes. And have you seen that coming through in terms of?
Yeah, I think this is very important, because I think this is one of the reasons that the action-based approach doesn't work, particularly for some of the complex biodiversity targets, in that even us as scientists, we don't know. We know in general terms what are the prescriptions, what's needed for individual species or habitats, but we don't know specifically in any one field what would be needed. And I think when you walk onto a field as an advisor with a farmer, and you can pick out a field that's in excellent condition. The farmer, you don't know what is made it into excellent condition. You have an idea, but the farmer knows exactly how that field has been managed by him, by the generations before them as well. And then all you need to do is say, God, make sure you maintain that management. What we've also found in as well, farmers in the one locality, when they get their scores, particularly in October, November, and they're in the mart or in the pub talking, you know, or on a discussion group, you know, say, well, God, I heard that you got a field with a score of 10. I only scored 4 on my field. How did you do that? And the farmers then exchange knowledge. So the way I manage this is this and this, you know. So I think that's hugely important, is to tap into that expertise of the farmers in terms of their understanding of their farms, understanding of their fields, their movement of their livestock, their cropping systems, you know. And all we need to really do is maybe step back and release control of it and say, we want your areas to look like this and produce this product. we'll work with you, and you probably know best how to actually produce that. And often in a situation, the farmer might know, well, I actually tried reclaiming that field a number of years ago or improving it. It didn't really work. But they knew what they were doing before they actually tried to improve it. And they could actually incorporate some of that management with modern techniques into the system.
Yeah, it's harnessing that knowledge and sometimes letting that just the farmer's the driver of it. To move forward from there. There's a couple of questions here. One is in relation to minimum number of years for a results-based scheme or contract to be effective. And then just another one on top of that as well is, are there any bonus payments for remedial improvements for someone starting with a good product, so land already in good condition, as an SAC, for example? Yeah.
So in terms of effectiveness, I'd say from the minute you change to results-based payments, they're more cost-effective. So in terms of effectiveness, that's from the very start, in that you're not going to be paying big money on fields that are delivering low quality. So it is. The other aspects of the question is, how long does it take? I think what you're trying to get is, how long does it take to move from low scores to higher scores? Now, in some areas, it will take quite an amount of time to move from low scores. And this is where it comes back to, some farms are naturally, and some fields are naturally advantaged to produce high quantities and quality of food. Some fields are naturally advantaged to produce high quantities and quality of biodiversity. So this is self-selecting, in that farmers that have fields that are 6, 7, 8, they can improve quite quickly to higher quality payments. But ones that are down and very, very low quality, they need quite an amount of remedial work in terms of putting in the green infrastructure on the area first to get them up and score. So that's why we've often combined it with supporting actions. So the fields that are very low in score, they're getting supporting actions to actually maintain their payments, but also to actually improve the quality. So that takes a bit of time. So it comes down to how you design your combination of supporting actions and the higher biodiversity. But also, I'm very keen on this, that the ones that have been producing high quality have always been producing high quality. These areas are secured straight away under this payments approach, in that they will be actually getting relatively high payments on the high scoring fields from the very start. Does that cover some of the questions?
Yes, I think it does, definitely.
Yeah.
I'll finish with one that's come through from one of the participants. So, how resource intensive are they to administer, and how much support is available to farmers in terms of expert advice and ongoing monitoring throughout the duration of the scheme?
Well, generally speaking of this, I would see we have found, particularly in the Burren, where this has been running the longest, as a hybrid approach, and we have the actions combined with the results-based payment. The results-based payment is, on general, maybe half the administration costs of the action-based approach, because with the action-based approach, we have to go out and verify that the action was done. There has to be receipts maintained. With the results-based approach, once it's done, it's a matter of going out. We've apps developed at this stage, a single farm visit in the year, the fields scored and submitted, and that's it. That's it done from the basic administration point of view. Then, in terms of the supporting actions, it does quite need a good advisory support, the same as a higher tiered agri-environmental scheme. So particularly if farmers are in a high scoring situation, really that doesn't need much advisory support. Then farmers know what they're doing, they've got good payments in the past. But if you want to move from lower to medium quality to high quality, then you concentrate your resources on working with them farms. And it's not that you're going in with the answers, you're going in to find the solutions to how these areas can be improved. So it can be quite resource intensive at that stage. But I would say in the work we've done, no more resource, and often less resource intensive than the higher tiered agri-environment schemes.
So in short, in an ideal world, this would be broadened out, and is in your perspective, the future of I suppose, land management schemes and support?
Yeah, I think without these, you have no quality assurance of your public supports. you know, if you don't tie some of your payments to the quality that's produced, then you're always going to get just mediocre quality. We see this in traditional markets as well. If you don't pay for quality and you pay the same price for everything, irrespective of quality, it's going to drive down standards.
No, thank you, and thanks for your presentation. And we'll have to wrap it up there. So just want to say thanks to everyone for tuning in, and both of our speakers for their excellent insight and knowledge. And I think a lot of the information here applies to ourselves whenever we'll be developing our own agricultural policy in the next few years. So I'll send on presentations to everyone who joined today, and there'll be a recording of the event online as well if you want to send around to colleagues or anyone else who'd be interested. Just want to raise attention that there'll be another webinar next week at the same time with the Nature Friendly Farming Network, a couple of the Northern Ireland Steering Group members, and Matt Raymond, an agricultural economist who's looking at the role that land management and nature friendly farming can play in a green recovery, the benefits that you get from that, and also how much you'd have to invest. So if you haven't registered for that one, get in touch with me and I'll get you a place on it. But thank you again, everyone, and speak to you soon.